Hey, Mythic Wavy here. With Wuthering released last week, I want to talk about my personal experience with the game. Was my expectations met? Obviously yes. If you say that Wuthering Waves was terrible, then you're either a Genshin shill, a part of the gacha gaming subreddit, or an actual dumbass. But is there any difference between the three? Who knows? By the way, these ratings may not be good, so if you have a problem with it, I don't know, fuck off, then that's your fault, I guess. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the release of Wuthering Waves. And this is the reason why this video is being so delayed for this week instead of last week. For the first few days of the game was basically unplayable as there were tons of bugs, the game was extremely laggy, and the game ran at 5 frames per second. But keep in mind that I was streaming my game, so that could be a reason why I was lagging so much. Unless you had a high-end PC or ran it on mobile for some people, it was extremely laggy and unplayable. But all this was to be expected. Whether it's coming from a gacha game, a first-person shooter, or an MMORPG. Unless it's coming from a big company, the game would probably be laggy and have bugs. Originally, for the release of the game, I wanted to rate it a 4 out of 10, or a 5 out of 10. But due to Kuro Games' compensation being a 5-star and giving us so many free pulls, I'm going to rate it as a 7 out of 10. Maybe if I actually played the game without streaming it, I would not lag as much and not experience frame drops. But that's my mistake. Also, if you're one of the people who are saying that Wuthering Waves is bad because of the bugs and lag, and you play Genshin and say Genshin is better, please keep in mind that Genshin's game was really bad during release. The first event was terrible, and the bugs that was happening, like running out of bounds, or you could literally be invincible, that was all bad. The next thing I'm going to be ranking is the story of the game. Now, in my opinion, the story of the game was really iffy to rank, since each act had its upsides and downsides. So I'm going to be breaking it down into 3 sections. The first section being the beginning, which is Act 1 and Act 2. The second section being the middle, being Act 3 and Act 4, and the end being Act 5 and Act 6. And before I start this, I'm going off the top of my head for this, and this is being recorded like 5 days after I finish story, so I may get some things wrong. Also, this is basically just a summary of the story and how I feel about the story, so if you want to skip ahead, skip to the next chapter, but if you want to give me the watch time, that would be appreciated. So, for the beginning of the game, I'm going to rate it 4 out of 10. There really isn't much to talk about, but how slow it was. Besides the combat trials with Gion in the beginning of the game, the crown list, there was basically no combat in this game. It basically felt like a chores list, forcing you to talk to everyone and run around the city doing objectives. Especially the part with Baiji and Morphe, that section took like 20 minutes. Okay, I might be over-exaggerating, but that part was extremely dry and bland. No matter how much I watched other people play it, and they try to make it fun, it just felt so bland to watch. If there was more combat sprinkled throughout these acts, then it would be rated higher, such as a 5 out of 10 or even a 7 out of 10. The only reason why I'm giving this a 4 out of 10 was because we unlocked the convene feature, and gambling is like my favorite thing to do. But everything that was needed to know for this game was released in the first act. Everything such as tacit discords and many other things was explained during that act. So if you skip through those acts and are confused through the game about what are these things or what's going on, then that's essentially your fault. Now we're going to be moving on to the middle, which is Act 3 and Act 4. These 2 acts were peak solely off of one character, my glorious King Scar. If it was without Scar, Act 3 would be a 7, but with Scar, the rating jumped up to a 9. My glorious King is just so perfect. From his voice, to his design, to the way he fights, everything about him is just so perfect. If I was in a room with Scar and my family, I would have to pick Scar, the only correct option. If you would pick your family, then you just don't love Scar good enough. Okay, enough glazing. Act 3 was 10 times better compared to Act 1 and 2 combined. Act 3 was extremely good with this theory of the sheeps and what happened. Then you fight Scar, and you can already see how I feel about Scar in his boss fight. And then we meet this game's version of Sparkle. And by the way, I don't care what anybody thinks. This game's Sparkle is basically Camila. If people can have their headcanons that Robin is a lesbian, I can have my headcanons that Sparkle and Camila are essentially the same person, just in 2 different universes. Now we're going to be moving on to Act 4, which was an actual Stooge Fest. Act 4 was just dialogue, a really long puzzle, which is just collecting something, finding some guards, collecting more things, finding more people, collecting more things, finding more people, collecting, fighting, collecting, fighting. But due to my glorious King Scar, he comes to save an act, which I will be giving this act a 6. And we can't forget about the dialogue with Jishi at the end. So there really wasn't anything to say about that act except for the excessive amount of dialogue and collecting, dialogue collecting, dialogue collecting. Moving on to Act 5, which was a solid 7 in my opinion. Compared to all the other acts, even though it was the same thing, this act was pretty good. It's the same thing as all the other acts, which is dialogue and collecting, dialogue objectives, dialogue objectives, dialogue objectives, all that other things. But for some reason it just felt like there was an actual meaning behind the dialogue. That's just my opinion. First we start off with Chishia and Yang Yang's dialogue, which was a literal snooze fest, as always. Then we go with Marina. And for some reason, I don't know what's up with her, but I don't know how I feel about her design. Like, there's something that could just be added to it to make it pop, but it's just not there, and I don't like it. So, next we fight these fodder-ass enemies who think they can step up to Big MC Rover. And then we have this real intimate moment with Camila. Like, if you look close enough, you can literally see the sexual tension between the two. Like, it's just right there. But sadly, Camila runs away before we can get our kiss in, which is really sad for Rover. But then we meet this game's black dealer and game terrorist, Encore and Alto. But before I continue, can I just say, or ask, why does every single game, or every single gacha game, have to have a fucking terrorist? And they're always these kids. They're always these small kids who just runs around blowing up things and committed arson. In Genshin we have Klee, in Star Wars we have Hook, in this game we have Encore. Maybe if we had actual schools or parents, or even a juvenile detention center, these kids wouldn't be running around just blowing up things or attacking people or doing whatever they want. Because these kids, they're doing it out of their own volitions. They process this. So now we're on the final act. Act 6, the peak of the game, where all the budget went to, where all the dialogue that we had to sit through and endure pays off. All of that comes together to make this masterpiece, Act 6, which obviously is a 10 out of 10, the only correct opinion. So first we get this lore about the war, or some tacit war, and that General Geshu was leading, and practically got everyone killed, and then Jian steps up and leads them to victory. We then play as Jian and see General Geshu in some illusion, some like genjutsu or something, and we have to do some fighting against some tacit discords. After that, we head back to Rover, and we need to find Taochi and fight against some tacit discords. And then we go to some military base, fight some more discords, and then we see the first death of the game, which was really surprising as every other gacha game takes either forever to show their first death, or doesn't show any of it at all. But then again, the only gacha games I played was Honkai Star Rail and Genshin, and some other like shitty gacha game, which not really doesn't say anything. So maybe other gacha games like Nikkei or Faith Grand Online, I think. So maybe if it's them, they might show a death like early on. Who knows? Well, you guys might know, but not me. We then go to Northfall Valleys, and this is where the final boss is. We push through some tacit discords, fight some more, and then we give some enemies the Caesar treatment and might give them permanent brain damage. And then we get a cool parkour scene with Jian and Rover. We then have to fight the Crownless, and then we get this cutscene with Jian takes a hit for us, Piccolo style. After this, Rover finally locks in and awakens his or her, whichever you pick. You should have picked a female, but I'm not going to judge if you picked a male. She finally erased her devil trigger. After that, we finished the fight with Crownless, and then happily ever after. So the story was good, but in my opinion, some places were just really slow, while others felt really good. Moving on to the next section, combat and exploration. So, for this section of the game, I'm going to be rating it a 10 out of 10. Unless you're a Genshin shill or an actual retard, you know that the combat in this game is actually amazing. Unless you like to summon for a character, max out that character, and beat the game with it, and then summon for that character's dupes, and then max out that character's dupes, and then beat the game for the next 7 patches, you know that the combat is actually really good in this game. You actually need to develop the skills to dodge attacks, parry attacks, swap canceling, and so many other techniques that you need to learn. Even echoes aren't overpowered. Whether it's a 5-star echo, boss echo, or normal echo, an elite echo, or whatever, echoes aren't too overpowered. There isn't really much to say on this section since everything is perfect, so we're moving on to the next section. So for the last section of the game, I have the end game. What I consider an endgame is finishing story and reaching unit level 30+. Sometimes it's objective from person to person, as some people may consider endgame as finishing story, some may consider unit level 30, but that's what I consider endgame. I'm not going to really rank this, and this is going to be more of just explaining what it is and how I feel about it, since every single gacha game, or most of them at least, have the same thing. You have your exploration, or grinding out for characters, and you have your final content such as MLC and Honkai, Abyss and Genshin, and in this game Tower University. Now just as a side note, I appreciate how hard Tower University is. If some random free-to-play person could just finish Tower University in a month or even a week with playing this game, they really should be endgame. I do know some content creators or people in general are struggling with this. It actually pushes the player to build their characters and get to their end goal. Like in Genshin, you could just play the game for maybe 2 months, build your characters, and then just one-shot everything in the game. Or maybe on floor 12, you might have a little bit of struggle and might need to retry. But in this game, it's actually hard, as you need to learn how to parry and dodge attacks. So it actually gives people a strive, and it might take them a couple of months to clear. But endgame in this game is really just echo farming, grinding your characters out, and then trying to clear Tower University. You also have your events, which, in my opinion, the events in this game are really well done. At least for the first event, being whatever it's called. I forgot what it's called, and I'm too lazy to look it up or log into the game to check. But it's basically like simulated universe in a Honkai Star Rail. But it actually was a little bit challenging. It's not too challenging, but I did fail a couple of times trying to do it. So that's basically it for this video, and this is essentially my second real video coming back. Well, not really coming back, but just my second real video. So it may be scuffed, just like my first video. Let me know what you think about this video, and if you enjoyed, like and subscribe. I also do stream on Twitch, and the link is in the description. That's all for today, and I hope you guys enjoyed.